Hello everyone and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah share. We're holding in Mishnah Berurah Chelik Vav. We'll be learning today Eretz Hashem Daf Gimel Amud Aleph. We're continuing to learn Hilchos Chol HaMoed. We're in Siman Taf Kuf Lamed Aleph, which deals with the halachas of taking a haircut or a shave on Chol HaMoed. And we pick up in the middle of Sif Daled on the top line of Gimel Amud Aleph. Now, I inadvertently yesterday I failed to read all of the Mechaber on a halacha that we already learned yesterday. So I'm just going to pick up from a few words into the top line on Gimel Amud Aleph in the Mechaber. We learned the halacha yesterday. We're speaking about the people who are allowed to take a haircut or a shave on Chol HaMoed because they are considered to be einsim. They're considered to be people who are not able to take a haircut or a shave on Erev Yom Tov. Let's remember, the reason why you're not allowed to take a shave or a haircut on Chol HaMoed is because Chazal said they want you to come into Yom Tov looking menschlich. They don't want you to come into Yom Tov when you're menuvel, when you're disheveled. And therefore Chazal said, if we're going to allow you to take a haircut or a shave on Chol HaMoed, you're going to be busy on Erev Yom Tov. You're going to say, I'll trim my beard on Chol HaMoed. They don't want that, Chazal. So Chazal said, you must take the haircut or the shave on Erev Yom Tov, and you're not allowed to do it during Chol HaMoed. However, the halacha that we've been learning over here is, there are individuals who we recognize that they were unable to take a haircut or a shave on Erev Yom Tov, and therefore for them it's mutter to do it on Chol HaMoed. And we had a few different people here. We had a person who got out of captivity, a person who got out of jail, and then on the top line of Gimel Amud Aleph we had V'chein haba mimedinas hayam b'Chol HaMoed. Let's say somebody was traveling and he came from overseas and he arrived home on Chol HaMoed. So on Erev Yom Tov he was still traveling. On Erev Yom Tov it was not possible for him to go take a haircut or a shave. Oy, continues the Mechaber, and this is the phrase that I failed to read yesterday, Oy sheba be'erev haregel, or even if this person returned from his journey on Erev Yom Tov, but v'lo hayashahos b'yom legaleach. However, he arrived late on Erev Yom Tov, so that there was no time for him to take a haircut or a shave on Erev Yom Tov. So those individuals are allowed to take a haircut or a shave on Chol HaMoed. Now the Mechaber gives a caveat to this last case, this case of somebody who is traveling. Says the Mechaber, V'hu shelo yotza me Eretz Yisroel l'chutz la'aretz l'tayil. You're allowed to go take a haircut or a shave on Chol HaMoed if you returned from your overseas travel or from an extended journey, if you arrived back at home either on Yom Tov or on late on Erev Yom Tov, with the exception of somebody who went from Eretz Yisroel to Chutz La'aretz l'tayil, on a pleasure trip. If you left Eretz Yisroel and you went on a journey, so you left Eretz Yisroel and you're going to Chutz La'aretz, and you're doing this stam for a pleasure trip, and you arrive in Chutz La'aretz late in the day on Erev Shabbos, on Erev Yom Tov, so you say, I was an Einus, I should be allowed to take a haircut on Chol HaMoed? No, you're not considered an Einus. Let's take a look at the Mishnah Berurah and see why. Very interesting halacha. Says the Mishnah Berurah, nice cut in your daled, V'hu shelo yotza, Pirush, the explanation of this is, Eretz Yisroel, Eretz Yisroel, if you're traveling from one place in Eretz Yisroel to another, so you're going from Bnei Brak to Yerushalayim, or you're traveling in Chutz La'aretz, so you're traveling from New York to Cleveland, even if you're only going for a pleasure trip and you're not going for anything that has anything to do with a mitzvah, it is nevertheless permissible for you to take a haircut if you weren't able to travel to take the haircut on Erev Yom Tov because of your travels, because your journey is one that's permissible. You didn't do anything forbidden. You didn't transgress an Isser by taking your trip. So if you're traveling from New York to California, and you arrive in California late on the day on Erev Yom Tov, and you're only going to California on a pleasure trip. You're going to California because you decided you want to go away for Pesach to a fancy hotel in California. So it's completely a pleasure trip. But you arrived late in the day on Erev Yom Tov, or if we're talking about Pesach, even if you arrived a little bit before Chatzos, you can't take a haircut after Chatzos on Erev Pesach. So then you're considered an oinus, and you're allowed to take a haircut on Chol HaMoed because you couldn't do it on Erev Yom Tov. After all, the whole journey is a permissible journey. Aval, however, may Eretz Yisroel l'chutz la'aretz, but if somebody is traveling from Eretz Yisroel to chutz la'aretz, somebody's going from Yerushalayim to New York, einoi mutter, that's not permissible, elo b'yotza laharviach, unless he's going on business. The trip is a business trip, oy lirois penei chaveroi, or at least he's going to visit a friend or relatives. Dehu chashiv dvar mitzvah shemuter lotzeis me'eretz Yisrael b'shvil zeh. If he's leaving Eretz Yisroel in order to go do business, or he's leaving Eretz Yisroel to go visit friends or relatives, so then that's considered that he's leaving Eretz Yisroel for a dvar mitzvah. Going to do business, going to visit friends and relatives, those are considered mitzvahs in this context. Masha'ein kein l'tayil ba'alma. But if somebody is leaving Eretz Yisroel to go spend Yom Tov in Florida because he wants to go to Disneyland, so he's going on a pleasure trip. It's not permissible to leave Eretz Yisroel to go to Chutz La'aretz on a pleasure trip. You're not allowed to do that. People think, I want to move to Eretz Yisroel. Let's remember that when you're in Eretz Yisroel, you don't have a right to leave Eretz Yisroel unless you're doing it for a dvar mitzvah. Otherwise, why are you leaving Eretz Yisroel? And in that case, if somebody's doing an isser by leaving Eretz Yisroel because he's only doing it on a pleasure trip, and now he arrives in Chutz La'aretz on Erev Yom Tov late in the day, so he couldn't take a haircut, and now you want to be mater him to take a haircut on Chol HaMoed. No, you should have never left Eretz Yisroel. Your whole trip was a trip of isser. In that case, lo yitir lo legalayach. In that case, there is no heter to go take a haircut in Chol HaMoed. We're not going to go easy on you and give you a heter to take a haircut in Chol HaMoed because you took a trip that was a trip of isser. You should have never taken this trip in the first place. Now, a couple of interesting things. First of all, you see so clearly from this halacha that you're not allowed to just stam leave Eretz Yisroel. Let's remember the Ma'amar Chazal, Misha Dar be'Eretz Yisrael ki Misha yesh lo elokah. Somebody who lives in Eretz Yisrael, it's as if he's close to the Rabbeinu Shalom. Ki Misha yesh lo elokah. He has a Rabbeinu Shalom. V'chol hadar b'chutz la'aretz daim l'misha ki Misha ein lo elokah. It's somehow there's a period, there's a separation between him and the Barei Olam because we live in chutz la'aretz. Unfortunately, we live in Chutz La'aretz, but there's tremendous reasons to live in Eretz Yisroel. I'm not standing here and telling everybody move to Eretz Yisroel right now. Everybody has to know their own situation, whether it's questions that pertain to Chinuch Habanim, or questions that pertain to Parnasa, or questions that pertain to Shalom Bayis. These are all things that have to be discussed with the Rav before somebody makes such a huge decision. But definitely, there are very powerful reasons not to be living in Chutz La'aretz and to be living in Eretz Yisroel. And if you are living in Eretz Yisroel, you cannot just get up and leave. There's also, let's say, a situation like there is now with the pandemic. So let's say somebody's in Eretz Yisroel, and now the situation with the pandemic becomes a problem. It's not so pashut, it's not so easy to just get up and leave Eretz Yisroel. Let's say somebody's in Eretz Yisroel and they're worried that a war is going to break out. So he wants to head for the hills. He wants to leave Eretz Yisroel and go back to Chutz La'aretz. That's not so pashut. You really have to ask a shaila. I heard a story, I'm not going to name names, but a very prominent gadol from the previous generation who was in Eretz Yisroel right before the 6-Day War. And he left before the 6-Day War, and he had tremendous charata. He was crying to Rav Moshe that Rav Moshe should be mispal for him, that he should have a kapara, because he realized that it wasn't pashut what he did, that he left Eretz Yisroel because of the fear of the war. He said, I did an isser, I did a chet, I wasn't allowed to leave. Why did I leave? And he said the reason he left was because this is somebody who lived through the Milchama. He lived through the Holocaust. He was in the camps. And when the people who are around at the time of the 6-Day War, they know that at the time of the 6-Day War, there was a tremendous fear of what would happen, chas v'chalila, that the Arabs they wanted to come into Eretz Yisroel and push the Yidden into the sea. So this Gadol said, ich hab nicht gekent durchleben zum zweiten Mal. I couldn't go through it again a second time, and that's why he left. But he realized afterwards, he says, it's not pashut what I did. So leaving Eretz Yisroel is not a simple thing. Now, in this Mishnah Berurah, the Mishnah Berurah says that there are two reasons that you could leave Eretz Yisroel. You could leave laharviach, which means literally to make money, or to visit a friend or a relative. So it seems that those are mitzvahs. Kedei laharviach, to do business is a mitzvah, and to go visit is also a mitzvah. There's a nice footnote here in the Dirshu, footnote number 8. He asks the question, when we say that it's a mitzvah in order to be marviach, to make money, does that mean only to make money kidei chayav? In other words, a person says, I pashut need it for my parnasa. So that we understand very simply that this taka mitzvah, a person has to provide for his family. But how about if he doesn't really need it for his parnasa? He sees a business opportunity, I could make a lot of money. I don't need the money, I'm doing well, but he wants to make more money. I could get rich quick. I have a great business opportunity, but I'm going to have to go from Eretz Yisroel to China. So is that going to China? Is that also considered a mitzvah? So he says over here in the footnote, for ha'im heter zeh shel yoytze laharviach, this heter to leave Eretz Yisroel if you're going to make money, hu rak lemi she'ein lo shum efsharis lehisparnes be'Eretz Yisroel. Does this only apply to somebody who can't make a parnasa in Eretz Yisroel, and that's why he's going to Chutz La'aretz for his basic parnasa needs? Or gam b'yotze l'tzarech harvacha? Or does it also apply to somebody who wants to make more money? He has a parnasa in Eretz Yisroel, but he has a great opportunity to make more money. Kasav le'el, he refers us back to Siman Reish Mem Chesiv Katan Lamadalin, le'inyan ha'yotze b'shayara tosh loisha yamim l'Shabbos. We learned these halachas together. The halacha of somebody who's going out to travel, he's going out on a caravan within 3 days before Shabbos. Shahayoytze laharviach, somebody who's going out to make money, av sheyesh lo mezainos, even though he has his basic parnasa, nechshav ki yoytze ledvar mitzvah, it's still considered going out for a dvar mitzvah. V'chein kasav amachsa shekel, shagam la'adam ashir haroytze lahagdilas oishroi, somebody who he's wealthy, he's a rich person, but he wants lahagdilas roishay, he wants to make even more money. Mutter latzeis l'shem kach l'chutz la'aretz, he is allowed to go out to chutz la'aretz for that reason, to make more money. V'hoisif, and the Sha'ar Tzion adds, shekei nira midivrei Rashi b'mayit katan. Now, that's as far as the mitzvah of going to make money. The next one the Mishnah Berurah said was to go on a visit. So in Dirshu footnote number 9, they bring a very nice raya, how you see that there's a mitzvah to go visit a friend, or to go visit a relative. A raya that you have, that in halacha it's considered a dvar mitzvah to go visit a chaver. Hevi Agra, the Gra brings down again in Siman Reish Mem Ches in Hilchas Tchumen. Me'agamara be'erevin, those of you who learned are learning Daf Yomi, you learned this not all that long ago. Shamuter la'arei ve'ruve tchumen, you're allowed to set up an eruve tchumen to allow you to travel outside of your tchum on Shabbos. Al manas laleches lirois penei chaveroi, if you're doing it so that you should be able to visit a friend. Af she'ein ma'arvin elo ledvar mitzvah. We know that the halacha is you're only allowed to make an eruve tchumen for a mitzvah purpose, like you want to go to a shir, you want to go to a rav's drasha, you want to be mavaka chayla. But you're also allowed to make an eruve tchumen if you're going to visit a friend. So you see that must be considered a dvar mitzvah. Now the poskim do speak about, is that to visit any friend? Is that only to visit a friend who's a Talmid Chacham? So you're going to learn Torah with him? Is it a friend that's ba min haderech? Is it a friend that was away for a long time and he just came back? Or is it stam any friend? So that the poskim speak about. Aber l'chol hapachas, you see that lirois penei chaveroi is considered a mitzvah, and therefore you're allowed to set up an eruve tchumen, and you're also allowed to leave Eretz Yisroel in order lirois penei chaveroi. Okay. Now we go to Sif Hey in the Mishnah Berurah. And Sif Hey in the Mechaber, and there is no Mishnah Berurah on Sif Hey. Says the Mechaber, Af al pi she'hitiru lehistaper, even though we're matir, all of these people who are considered anusim, all of these people who we understand that they couldn't take a haircut in Erev Yom Tov, so we matter them to take a haircut on Chol HaMoed, af al pi she'hitiru lehistaper, even though we matter them to take a haircut, lo yistaper b'rishus harabim, they should not do it in a public place, ela b'tzina, they should do it behind closed doors. We don't want people to see that you're taking a haircut on Chol HaMoed, even though we're only matter you to do it in cases like these, where we consider it to have presume milsa, where we assume that people understand why you're taking the haircut. Still in all, the Mechaber says, don't do it b'rishus harabim, do it b'tzina. Says the Mechaber in Sivav, Katan, a minor child, and we're going to see that means under 13 and a day, a child that's under bar mitzvah. Katan, mutter legaleach b'moed, you're allowed to give him a haircut on Chol HaMoed, afilu noiled kadam regel. And we're talking about a child, even if he was already born before Yom Tov, so you could have given him a haircut before Yom Tov. And indeed, the Mishnah Berurah is going to say even an older child, as long as he's less than bar mitzvah, you're allowed to give him a haircut on Chol HaMoed. And the Ramah says, "Va'afilu b'farhes yashari," and this you're allowed to do even in public, because people realize that you're giving a haircut to a katan, to a minor child, and that's mutter. Let's take a look at the Mishnah Berurah here in Ois Katan Tezvav. Katan. Why are you allowed to give a katan a haircut? Well, first, let's just mention, what are the possible problems with giving a katan a haircut? One problem is, we said the whole problem with taking a haircut on Chol HaMoed is that Chazal said, we don't want you to come into the Yom Tov kishehu menuvel. We don't want you to come into the Yom Tov disheveled. And therefore, you have an obligation to take a haircut and make yourself nice, neat, clean, and trim before Yom Tov. Therefore, we said you're not allowed to do it on Chol HaMoed. If you didn't do it before Yom Tov, you're not allowed to do it on Chol HaMoed. Okay, so you'll say to yourself, by a child also, I should make sure that the child has a haircut before Yom Tov. Now, the thing is, that's not the child's problem. The child is not bar mitzvah. So the child doesn't have this mitzvah on him that he's required to take a haircut before Yom Tov, so he shouldn't come into Yom Tov menuvel. He doesn't have any chiyuvim. He's not a bar mitzvah. So the chiyuv maybe is on the parent. You want to tell the parent, you have an obligation to give your kid a haircut before Yom Tov. But now you're going to go penalize the child? So the father fell down on the job, the mother fell down on the job, they didn't give the child a haircut before Yom Tov. So now you're going to penalize the child for that? That doesn't make sense. So let's see the Mishnah Berurah here, Ois Katan Tesvav. The Chavetz Chaim says, the reason the child is allowed to take a haircut is the L'shayich Beitai Mishalei Kanis L'mayid Kishu Manovel. The rationale that he shouldn't be able to take a haircut in Chol HaMoed because we don't want him to come into the Mayid Kishu Manovel doesn't apply to him. The Lav Bar Mitzvahu. He's not a bar mitzvah. He doesn't have that chiyuv. But, and this the Mishnah Berurah is going to bring down, this comes from a Nemuke Yosef in Moed Katan, V'davka sheyesh lo seir rav, but this is only if the kid has a lot of hair, the mitzvah al yedei zeh, and the hair is causing him tsar, it's causing him suffering. And the reason for that is, why are you giving the child a haircut? If the child has a lot of hair and he's mitzvah, it's scratching his neck, it's making him hot and sweaty, so then we say it's mutter to give him a haircut because he needs a haircut. And we're not going to penalize him because you didn't give him a haircut before Yom Tov. But if he doesn't have any tsar, if it doesn't bother him, how many times do you tell a kid, come, I'm going to give you a haircut? Yeah, I don't need a haircut. The kid doesn't want a haircut. It doesn't bother him. The hair doesn't bother him. You might feel, I can't take my kid to shul looking like that. Why not? Because everybody's going to look at me and they're going to say what a lousy father I am. Well, who's this kid's mother that lets the kid come to shul like this on Yom Tov? That's not the kid's problem. That's your problem. Maybe you should have made sure that the kid had a haircut before Yom Tov. So we're not making a terim for you, but we are going to make a terim for the kid. So if the kid is mitzvah because he has a lot of hair, then you're allowed to give him a haircut on Chol HaMoed because we're not going to penalize him because of your negligence. And the truth is, you could see this in the Sharet Zion Ois Katan Yud Gimel, even though it's not right over here in the Mishnah Berurah. But if you look at the Sharet Zion Ois Yud Gimel, the Chavetz Chaim says, Va'oid Diknasu. The whole reason we don't let you take a haircut in Chol HaMoed is really it's a penalty, because you should have done it before Yom Tov. We're not going to penalize the kid because of the negligence of the father and the mother. Continues the Chavetz Chaim. However, you should realize that it's only mutter for you to give a haircut to a katan, to a yid who's a minor child. The tzarech haregel hu b'shvil hakatan, because it is a tzarech hamoed for the kid. The kid is uncomfortable on Yom Tov, so there's a tzarech hamoed to give him a haircut. Aval la'akum asal legalech. If you're a barber and there's a non-Jew who wants a haircut, so you'll say, well, the non-Jew is allowed to take a haircut on Chol HaMoed. Yeah, but you're not allowed to give him a haircut on Chol HaMoed. It's no different than in any other malacha that you're not allowed to do on Chol HaMoed, unless you push it, you're a barber, you don't have food to put on the table for Chol HaMoed, then you're allowed to go ahead and do your profession. You're allowed to go give a haircut to a non-Jew on Chol HaMoed. Ais Katan Tezayin, the Mechaber said, Afilu Noilad, a Katan, you're allowed to give a haircut to him, even if he was born before Yom Tov, so theoretically you could have given him a haircut before Yom Tov. Ritzon Eloimar, what the Mechaber wants to say with this is, after Hayayachal Legalchem Ikaidem, Shari, even though you could have given him a haircut before Yom Tov, still in all, it's mutter to give him a haircut on Yom Tov, Umitamamal, for the reasons that we explained. V'ayin b'Prima Gadim, the Chavetz Chaim says you should take a look at the Prima Gadim, Shemitzadeid, who leans towards saying, Ta'afilu hu ben kameshonim, that this is not only talking about a baby, a toddler, Kol shelo yigia l'shloish esrei shanim, as long as he's not a bar mitzvah, mutar legalcha, you're allowed to give him a haircut. Ais Katan Yud Zayin, the Ramah said you're allowed to give him a haircut even before Hesia. Shari, it's mutar even in public. Why? Ta'al kol royan shu katan, because everybody realizes that he's a katan. Okay, now we go to Siv Zayin. Says the Mechaber. Ovel, somebody who's Nebuch Le'aleinu an Ovel, somebody who's in mourning. Shechal Shvi Shaloi B'Shabbos Erev Haregel. So somebody, let's say, lost Nebuch Le'aleinu, somebody lost a parent, and he's sitting Shiva. And the Shiva ends on Erev Yom Tov, but Erev Yom Tov is Shabbos. So now what happens? The Shiva ended on Erev Yom Tov. Since the Shiva ended on Erev Yom Tov, that means that Shloishim began on Erev Yom Tov. If Shloishim began on Erev Yom Tov, then Yom Tov is mevatel the Shloishim. Now, a child who's sitting Shiva for a parent, is not allowed to take a haircut, not only for Shiva, he's not allowed to take a haircut during Shloishim. He's also not allowed to take a haircut during the entire year until somebody tells him, wow, you got a lot of hair, you really need a trim. Then he's allowed to take a haircut. But now, this oval over here, his Avelus, his Shiva ended on Erev Yom Tov. And since his Shiva ended on Erev Yom Tov, the Shloishim is also broken by Yom Tov. Now, he couldn't take a haircut on Erev Yom Tov because Erev Yom Tov was Shabbos. Now it's Chol HaMoed. Now during Chol HaMoed, als dine avelus, he's allowed to take a haircut because he doesn't have any shloishim. Yom Tov broke his shloishim. So als dine avelus, he's allowed to take a haircut. Is he allowed to take a haircut because of Chol HaMoed? The answer is yes. He's allowed to take a haircut because he's not negligent that he didn't take a haircut on Erev Yom Tov. He wasn't allowed to take a haircut on Erev Yom Tov. Erev Yom Tov was Shabbos. So therefore the Mechaber says, Ovel shechal shvi shaloi b'Shabbos erev haregel. If you have an ovel where his seventh day of Avelus ends up on Erev Yom Tov, which is Shabbos, mutar legaleach b'Chol HaMoed. He's allowed to take a haircut on Chol HaMoed. Says the Mishnah Berurah is Katan Yud Ches. The reason he's allowed to take a haircut on Chol HaMoed is because he wasn't able to take a haircut on Erev Yom Tov. Erev Yom Tov was Shabbos. Okay, says the Ramah, bottom line in the Shulchan Aruch. Haga, mi shehemer dasai, somebody Nebuch Le'aleinu who was a mourner, somebody who went off the derech and he was oved avodah zara. Mi shehemer dasai, he's a heretic. V'chazar b'tshuva, and Baruch Hashem, he's a bal tshuva. V'darkai, and it was their minig legaleach. when somebody went off to the extent that he was a heretic, that he was Oved Avodah Zarah, when such a person did tshuva, the minig was that he should take a haircut, he should take a shave. Let's see why. Let's take a look right away at the Mishnah Berurah that starts on Gimel Amud Aleph in the bottom line. V'darka l'galeach. It was the meaning that such a person would shave. Pirush b'makom shenoyagin shabali tshuva megalchin. In a locale where that taka was the minig, where somebody who was a heretic and became a bal tshuva is megaleach, he cuts off all his hair. And why would they do such a thing? The avodas gilulim dami lemeis, because avodah zara is compared to a corpse. V'lemitzora, and a person who worships avodah zara is compared to a mitzora. Sheton giluach, and we know that these are people who need to be shaved. So somebody who is over avodah zara also needs to be shaved. So in that case, says the Ramah, mutter legaleach b'moed, such a person is allowed to shave and cut his hair on Chol HaMoed. Says the Mishnah Berurah is cut chaf, mutter legaleach b'moed, afilu chazar b'tshuva kaidam aregel v'haya yachal legaleach mikaidam. This is very interesting. Even if this person became a bal tshuva not late in the day on Erev Yom Tov, he became a bal tshuva a week before, and really he could have taken a haircut and a shave on Erev Yom Tov. So why are we allowing him to take a haircut and a shave on Chol HaMoed? Says the Chavetz Chaim, afilu hachi shari b'diavad. B'diavad, it's still mutter for him to do this on Chol HaMoed. Why? Shaharei ein mitzarfen oisay l'chol davar shebekdusha ad sheyigaleach. Because this person has a special problem on Yom Tov. They're not going to count him to a minion. They're not going to give him an aliyah. They're not going to be mitzaref him to any davar shebekdusha. They're not going to let him join. Why? Because he was a heretic. So until they see that he took the haircut and he took the shave, they're not going to be mitzaref l'chol mili shebekdusha, and therefore he's allowed to do these things even on Chol HaMoed. Okay, we're going to stop here. We're going to stop here at Sivches. Thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. The schus of limud HaTorah should stand God's Klal Yisrael in good stead. The Ram should send Yeshuas and Refuas and Parnasa to all those in need. We should be zeicher to see the Bias Girl Tzedek b'meher v'yameinu. Be well.